Today I'm going to talk about the Headless Children by the band W.A.S.P. It's their fourth studio album, released on April 15th, 1989 through Capitol Records. It is celebrating 35 years. The album did pretty well in the charts, reaching number 48 on the US Billboard 200 chart, the band's highest chart position. It remained on that chart for 13 weeks. The band broke up after this in 1990, but it was brief. They came back 2 years later for The Crimson Idol in 1992. Let me backtrack a little for some history. W.A.S.P. signed to Capitol Records for their debut album, W.A.S.P., released on August 17th, 1984. This was their self-titled debut. I found some interesting trivia. The original title of the album was going to be Winged Assassins. This was also a time when heavy metal was still this big and scary beast. W.A.S.P. was one of those bands that was shocking, despite having more of a commercial sound. I think of this band as being the equivalent to Motley Crue from their Shout at the Devil era. This band started to make waves after they released the first single called Animal Fuck Like a Beast. The song was even omitted from the album in the United States to prevent it from being banned from major chain stores. Despite the controversy, they started to get more popular. They had a minor hit with the song Blind in Texas, a song written by Blackie Lawless. The song was released on their next album, The Last Command, in September of 1985. The Last Command remains W.A.S.P.'s highest charting album, peaking at number 47 on the Billboard album chart. Blind in Texas is perhaps their best-known song, more than 3 decades after its release. The Last Command was also the first album with a new drummer, Steve Riley, who was formerly of the band Keel. After the Last Command tour, they went through some more lineup changes. This was the last album with Randy Piper, one of the original guitarists. Then they got a former King Cobra bassist, Johnny Rod. He joined W.A.S.P. And Blackie Lawless went back to playing rhythm guitar. This was a time when the band was benefiting from negative press. They became target of the Parents Music Resource Center, otherwise known as the PMRC, which was led by Tipper Gore. Despite the free publicity, the band also had to endure some negative effects, such as concert halls getting bomb threats, band members receiving death threats, and even Blackie Lawless was shot at twice, but luckily he was not hit. They were ready to record the third album called Inside the Electric Circus, and the album was recorded in October of 1986. But the years went by and the band decided it was time for a change after 3 albums. They felt they had enough with the overly sexually explicit songs, so they decided to write songs for the next album, which is called The Headless Children, which is the subject matter of this particular video. This new album worked in their favor. It was their most critically acclaimed work up to that point, and according to Blackie Lawless, it is their highest selling album to date. The album had Frankie Banali on drums, who was previously in the band Quiet Riot. This was also the last album with the guitar player Chris Holmes, until he rejoined the band in 1995 to record their album called KFD, or Kill Fuck Die. This is also the last album that featured a bass player named Johnny Rod. So with all these members leaving, the band decided to break up, but that breakup only lasted a year, and they recorded another album called The Crimson Idol, which was originally a Blackie Lawless solo album, but he decided to put it under the W.A.S.P. name. This one has some of the most well-known songs, a power ballad called Forever Free, and a cover of The Real Me, originally by the classic rock band The Who. The album did not have songs about sex, but instead they chose to write songs about politics and social issues, which was something that many metal bands were doing at that time. The cover art is based on Gateway to Stalingrad, a cartoon by Daniel R. Fitzpatrick. It depicts many historical figures, including Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, Benito Mussolini, Charles Manson, Jim Jones, Idi Amin, Pol Pot, Al Capone, and the Ku Klux Klan, with an image of Jack Ruby shooting Lee Harvey Oswald shown in the foreground. Later editions of the album replaced the Ayatollah Khomeini with some more additional KKK members. The album has 10 tracks. It's 48 minutes long. They recorded 2 cover songs for this album. The first one I mentioned, The Real Me, originally by The Who. They also did a cover of Locomotive Breath, originally by Jethro Tull. The album opens with The Heretic, The Lost Child. This is about the pain of a lost child who's born again and then he dies in these terrible circumstances. There's a second meaning of the song about how boys are turned into martyrs with war, and they really never get to live their lives. It's interesting how they kicked off the album with a 7-minute song. The song is a banger though. They kept it interesting throughout the song. There's one part in the middle of the song where they do this isolated guitar part that has this new wave of British heavy metal vibe. I thought it was a good opener. Chris Holmes has some awesome guitar work on this song. After that is The Real Me, which is the cover song, and I remember watching, I believe it was Headbangers Ball, and Blackie Lawless was talking about this song, and he said the meaning behind it, or the reason they chose to cover this was he wanted people to see the band for what they are, saying, take a look at us now, this is the real me. This was the first song that I heard from the album. It was the first single, I believe. I knew about the original because I grew up listening to The Who. The cover is good. It's metal enough for the album. They make good use of the instruments, such as the bass guitar and the keyboards, and they can all be heard very well. Then there's the title track, and this one is about children who suffer during times of war, how terrible it is and have innocent children experience these terrible times. This is another good one. The intro sounds like a horror movie, and the opening guitar riffs remind me of something you would hear on like a typical Ozzy Osbourne album. They use some creepy sound effects and that added to the intensity of the songs. They then added these Deep Purple style keyboards. That's what I like about this album. They had a sound that was both classic heavy metal and classic rock. I'm also just noticing this now. Some of the guitar riffs reminded me of classic Iron Maiden. I had forgotten what this band sounds like. I actually haven't listened to this in a while. Next is the song Thunderhead. This is about heroin addiction. It appears to be from the point of view of a person whose name is Thunderhead. He's an addict. The song sounds like an epic classic rock song from the early 70s. It has this slow building piano intro and some orchestration. Then it goes into this classic metal guitar riff. The song in general has a classic metal feel. The chorus is very big and the lyrics are very powerful. It's one of the longer tracks at close to 7 minutes. I noticed they were not trying to make a commercial album that was accessible, but they were trying to reinvent themselves into a band that had a message as opposed to just being shocking. Let me also say that there's a little bit of cheesiness here. There's one part where you hear this ominous voice talking to Thunderhead as if he was his master. But otherwise, the solos are awesome. They have a classic rock influence mixed with metal. Mean Man is a song about Chris Holmes. The song was written by Blackie Lawless, and it was about the wild lifestyle that he led. This was one of the singles, and it had a Locomotive Breath on the B-side. This was just a straightforward heavy metal song. It's fast, it's heavy, it's in your face. At the same time, it's also a very catchy song. It's interesting that the song did fairly well in the UK and the charts, peaking at number 21, but it did not chart in the US, interestingly. The Neutron Bomber is a song about Ronald Reagan and how he had an arsenal of nuclear weapons. Interesting to note that George Bush Sr. was president at the time the album was released, but the song was most likely recorded before that. I never noticed this before, but the song sounded very familiar. I had read one of the comments, someone said it sounded like Love Gun by Kiss, but I also noticed a little similarity with the song Fake Healer by Metal Church, but otherwise, it's a traditional heavy metal song. I thought it was very good. There's a nice mix of the heavy guitars and the keyboards, giving it a metal and a classic rock feel. Mephisto Waltz is an instrumental. It's short, has a classical guitar sound, kind of like the types of instrumentals that appeared on those old Black Sabbath albums. Next is the power ballad Forever Free. Back then, metal bands usually made sure to have at least one power ballad, as it was their ticket to getting on the charts. The song is supposedly a tribute to Freebird by Leonard Skinner. I'm surprised it did not chart in the US, but it reached 25 on the UK charts. I still like it. Now that I'm listening to it again, I like the drumming and the interlude that goes into the solo, and the song is pretty good. Man Eater is the most glam metal sounding song on the album, or at least in my opinion it is. It's not a bad song. It kind of reminded me of a Skid Row type of song. Supposedly the song is about Blackie Lawless's favorite Harley Davidson, and I can see that by looking at the lyrics. Next is Rebel in the FDG. According to the liner notes of the album, FDG stands for Fucking Decadent Generation. This reminds me of a Motley Crue song, but from their Shout at the Devil era. It just had that sound to it. It was one of those songs that had a lot of attitude. So that is all. It was interesting going back to this album. I had not listened to it in a long time. Back when I was getting into heavy metal, I had this one and the two albums released before it on CD. I thought it held up very well, and I might like it even more now than I did back then. I definitely heard some new stuff that I hadn't noticed before. Let me know in the comments what you think of this album. Is this their best album? I still need to listen to their later albums. Check out this video right here. It's something different. I didn't do any WASP reviews before. It's actually my first time doing a WASP review. I'm surprised. But like this video. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.